This is a time of year where, as a Protestant church, it's kind of difficult to get everything of the Easter season in. If we were a church that observed Holy Week with services, it would give us enough time to put everything I'd like to say about Easter and put it into sermon form, but it's difficult to do that when we just have a few Sundays. I want to turn your attention this morning to the Gospel of John in chapter 13. I'm going to read the first 17 verses to you, and then we will discuss it from there. It's on page 1534 if you're trying to find it with the Pew Bible. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Now the evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. And so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin. He began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. And when he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus said, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus said, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands, my head as well." And Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said not everyone was clean. And when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Last Sunday, as we shared together the story of Jesus, the Good Shepherd. Now, in the New Testament, we see a lot of stories that Jesus prepared for crowds, for multitudes, for people all over where he was trying to teach. And then there were some things that Jesus put in the New Testament that were not intended for the crowd, but for the inner circle, his disciples. You see, the setting that we have here is the Jewish community every year, and even to this day, observes the Passover. Goes back to Egypt, when the angel of death went to every home and to the firstborn of every family. And if the blood of the Passover lamb was not painted on the two sides of the doorway, the angel stepped in and the firstborn did not wake up that next morning. But if the blood was there, the death angel passed over that house. That's the term, Passover. Among the Jewish community, everyone who followed the rules was exempt from the effect of the death angel. But across Egypt, there was a crying and a wailing, unlike Egypt had never known. They had come through all of the miracles that have been shown them, and he requested to let my people go. And the Pharaoh kept reneging. Start to, and then he'd pull back. And so this was the last plague that was shared in Egypt. In the Jewish community, this is a very sacred time to them. Now, Jesus here in the story that we have here is the story as told by the disciple and later who became an apostle, John. John the Beloved. John the brother of James. John the son of Zebedee. And God used him to write and pen the words of five books of the New Testament. He did the gospel according to John. He did the epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And God used him while on the Isle of Patmos to write the words of the vision, the Revelation, last book of the New Testament. John had written all of these. He was John the Beloved. He was John, the one that Jesus was very fond of, very close to. Now, they had gathered in what we call an upper room, a place that they had rented a place. I'm sure it was probably half the size of our fellowship hall, but it was big enough to do what they needed to do. There was 12 disciples. Jesus didn't need more than that. And they had prepared the traditional Jewish Passover feast. But Jesus was talking on a different note. He was using a number of things that he was trying to say to his own apostles because they were about to have their world turned upside down. They had spent 3 years where Jesus constantly asked him, "Who do you say that I am? And who do other people say that I am?" He wanted to know whether or not he was getting through to people. But he gathered for this Passover feast, and he did something that just absolutely, totally shocked them. He said he wanted to wash their feet. Now, there's a lot of customs that have gone out of, out of practice, because in the world that you and I live in the last 125 years, our world has totally changed. I look at the back wall of the church. There's a picture over there when Middle Road was a gravel road. Well, if you walked the gravel road or you took your horses down that road, lots of dust. And in those days, a lot of the travel was done by foot. There were no cars, limousines, buses. There were donkeys. I don't know if they had horses or not, but they had camels. They had beasts of burden that would carry the loads. Quite often, they not only rode on them, quite often they walked beside them. They wore sandals in those days, which were an open shoe. And as you can imagine, their feet were very tired. They were loaded with calluses. They were dusty and dirty. And I'm sure there was a few of them that didn't smell that good. It is what it is. That's life. But it's only in recent times that you and I live in a world that we live that totally unrelates itself to what we're talking about today. Now, what was a custom in those days was as if a house was well-to-do enough that they had servants that worked at the house. Didn't say they were slaves, but if they had servants at the house, It was the job of the servants to welcome the guests in and to wash their feet, to rest them, and to clean them up from the dusty roads that they have been traveled, and let those feet soak in a little bit of water until they would feel a little better before they sat down with the family they were visiting. What was unusual that Jesus, as teacher, as Lord, as master, that he chose to do the work of a servant. And that's what was out of form here in this picture. If I take you back a little earlier, just before this setting, if you took the Gospel of John and backed up 2 chapters to chapter 11, you would see there a picture of Mary, the sister of Martha and Lazarus, who one night took a bottle of alabaster, a very expensive perfume, and spilled it all over the feet of Jesus. And then instead of taking a towel, she took her hair and wiped off the feet of Jesus. The alabaster box that she opened up and the perfume she cut loose was a very powerful and very expensive, and was normally used at a burial, because embalming, as we do today, that preserves the body, is only a recent practice in the last 50 years. In those days, when a body died, it did what all bodies do when they die: they decompose. Don't smell too good. The nature of it, when life is gone out of a body, there's nothing left to preserve that body. It's dead. And so when somebody died, they would take expensive perfumes to cover up the decay of the body and wrap it in burial cloths and either put it in a grave in the ground or a tomb that was above the ground and put a stone in front of it. The background to this story I read to you today in the Passover was that Lazarus had died. Lazarus, Mary, and Martha were very close to Jesus. Jesus stayed in their home many times. Very close. He loved them dearly. Lazarus got sick and he died. Jesus was not there. But they sent word to Jesus and said to him, we've lost Lazarus. He's very sick. And before he got there, they said, he not only has died, but he's been gone for 4 days. And they had already put him in a burial tomb. The shortest verse of the Bible is in chapter 11. Jesus wept. He sat down on the human side of Jesus, just wept. He was devastated at seeing the people that he loved that were crying, that were devastated over the loss of a loved one, and he missed them too. And Jesus said to him, under those circumstances, he said, I want you to take me to his tomb. Why, Jesus? He'd been in there 4 days. Not smelling too good. You don't want to open that. You don't want to go in there right now. Jesus said, take the stone away. And so, not knowing what Jesus was up to, whatever they had to do to roll that stone out of the way, I don't know. They didn't have hydraulics. They didn't have air pistons. They didn't have hinges that made that easy. Somehow or another, they managed to roll the stone that was acting as a gate to that tomb, rolled it out of the way. And then Jesus did what only Jesus can do. He called in. He didn't go in the tomb. He called in and called Lazarus by name. Lazarus, come on out here. I want to see you. Man, oh man, you want to talk about heart stopping. Their hearts have been torn apart at his loss. Is this a cruel joke that Jesus is doing? Or is something going to happen here? And so, next thing they saw, Lazarus literally stood up and came out of the tomb, all covered with the cloths that they wrapped around the arms and the head and the feet, and that they soaked those cloths in the perfumes that they had. He was still covered in that stuff, but he came out. Come on out, Lazarus. You're not done. You went to sleep. You're not dead. And Lazarus came to life. Now the word of Lazarus come to life. It's spread everywhere. Now we get a picture of Jesus, not only a rabbi, not only a teacher, not only a Lord and a master. Jesus said the words, I am, not I can do, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, Jesus was trying to say things to his disciples. He took a tomb that had a stone in front of it and brought Lazarus back to life. What do you think he was trying to say? He's trying to give them the idea that when he got put in the tomb, that he could be brought back to life. He's trying to say something to them indirectly. Because the things were happening in the last week of the life of Jesus before his crucifixion were more than what they could take in and absorb in their mind. Now Jesus, in this picture that we have today, we leave the picture of Lazarus where Jesus was able to do a resurrection by command. And now this great guy is on his hands and knees washing dirty, cruddy, smelly, calloused feet. He never done that. They've been together for 3 years. He never washed their feet before. Somebody else did. But in this particular occasion, Jesus was on his hands and knees washing feet. Now, Peter was Peter. He was an interesting character. Peter was always the one that went overboard in his reaction to things that Jesus said. Peter's the one that decided to walk on water. Peter's the one who always went overboard. You remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, when the guards from the temple came to arrest Jesus, to take him in for his trial, it was Peter that cut off the soldier's ear. In those days, they had short swords. They weren't the 4-foot ones. They were short ones. Being an old fisherman, they always kept a knife around. But Peter was a bad shot. Either that or the soldier moved. Because Peter wasn't aiming for the guy's ear. He was aiming for his head. Guy moved, and he only got his ear. Peter was a very demonstrative person in everything he did. And so when Jesus wanted to wash the feet of the disciples, Peter said, no. I should be washing your feet, Jesus, not you washing mine. But Jesus had a debate with Peter, and he said to Peter, either you let me do this or I'm going to push you aside. I'm here and I'm doing this for a reason. I want to tell you that I'm not only Lord over the grave, but Jesus said the Father had given him the power to lay his life down and the power to take it back up again. So Peter said, wash me all over. Jesus said, no way, Peter. I'm washing your feet. I stopped there. And so Jesus went about washing the feet of his 12 disciples. Then Jesus went on to do some talking that night. I mean, again, Jesus was telling his disciples things so fast their heads were not able to take it all in. He turned around and he said, you know, one of you that has followed me for 3 years is going to betray me. They started looking at each other and said, who is it? Which one of us? Well, Judas was the treasurer. Got to keep an eye on those treasurers. But Judas was the treasurer for the 12 apostles. He was the one who handled the cash that they used to go buy bread or food and things that they needed along the way. Wherever the money came from, he was the one who handled it. And Jesus said, the one I dip the bread in the oil and hand it to is the one that'll betray me. And he handed the bread to Judas. The Bible says that as he did that, Satan entered the heart and the life and empowered Judas. And he was taken over by the power of Satan at that point. He had already made an agreement with the Jewish leaders that he was going to betray Jesus. And the deal was for 30 pieces of silver. That wasn't the price of a king. That was the price of a servant. And here is Jesus becoming a servant in front of his apostles, showing them that if you want to follow me, yes, there's times when you may be up front and do other things. He says, you want to follow me, you need to have the mind set of a servant. Be willing to do. Not about saying who you are, it's about what you do for Jesus Christ. And so Jesus said to Judas is going to be the one that'll betray me. Now Peter, who just got done protesting that he didn't want Jesus just to wash only his feet, Jesus turned around to Peter and said, and you're going to deny me, deny that you know me, that you're one of us, 3 times before the 6 a.m. rooster starts doing his cock-a-doodle-doo in the morning. Peter says, no way. Jesus said, I'm telling you, you're going to. You're going to deny me before the rooster comes up and does his thing in the morning. Wow. This is all a one get-together, that all these things are happening. And to go from Jesus washing their feet to telling them that one was going to betray him, one was going to deny him, and the others were going to disappear out of fear. They're going to run away. They're not going to deny Jesus. They're just not going to be there. What you and I do not get is to feel the pulse of what was going on with these apostles and disciples before the trial and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Their whole world, their whole religious community was turning against them. Their master, who performed all kinds of miracles, was going to allow them to do things that he had the power to stop. We love singing that song, and I love hearing it played. He could have called 10,000 angels. Yes, he could have, but he did not. He bowed his head and his heart and his body and allowed it to be striped and beaten and a crown of thorns, to be treated miserably, as bad as you could treat a person. This is the guy that just got done raising Lazarus. This is the guy that said all kinds of miracles. This is the guy that for years has been letting the blind see and the lame walk. This same Jesus now is going to be treated badly in the midst of his trial before they condemned him to a crucifixion. What was his crime? King of the Jews. That was the plaque that was written in Arabic, nailed to his cross. What did he do wrong? He said he was the King of the Jews. Well, Caesar couldn't have that. Pilate couldn't have it. They didn't want it. They don't know what it meant, but they didn't want it. The chief priests, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, begging Pilate pass him on and order his crucifixion. Release Barsabbas, who was a known thief. Release him and send this man to the cross. Jesus, the servant. Hard to believe. Well, let's ratchet the time forward to 2024, to the year that we're living in today. It's not popular to be Christian. There are forces all over America that are promoting things that are contrary to the teachings of the Bible. They're in our schools. I was listening last night. Has somebody asked the question, has West Point gone woke? Word used for putting in the racial balance and things of the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that is spreading all over America. The things they're teaching our children. Not popular being a Christian today. But I want to leave you with something encouraging. I read to you from chapter 13, and I want you, if you still have a Bible, turn with me to the next chapter and the first verse. And that's the verse I want to leave you with today. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. And so what I leave you with today is the admonition of Jesus. In spite of all that's going in the world today, all the pressure against Christianity, the fact that our belief is the minority point of view today in America, down to 23% Christian. We are not the majority point of view. Let not your heart be troubled. In spite of all of these things, and like things went backwards for a little while there in Jerusalem, and Jesus was crucified, he said to his disciples, I want to give you the inside curve here. Don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in me? In my Father's house are many mansions. That's for real. That's eternal. That's the hope of every Christian. That's the faith of what we believe in. That's the reason Jesus died on the cross and was resurrected. And because there is a heaven, there is a life after death, and there is a place where we can spend eternity with Jesus Christ. Thank you.